Welcome to the palace. I am your guide. You've found your way to another slow, gentle exploration of the past. Tonight, we travel back to a time before the Greece of philosophers and playwrights, long before the temples of white marble, to an age where palaces were painted with ochre and red, where power was measured in jars of oil and bundles of wool, and where myths had not yet become stories. They were simply life. You are in Mycenaean Greece around 1200 BCE. The world is older, quieter, stone walls hold in the heat of the day. Goats shuffle along dry paths. Somewhere inland, on a hill above the sea, the palace of Pylos breathes with slow activity, not of kings and warriors, but of scribes, oil pressers and cooks. As you settle deeper into your pillow, let us wander slowly through this ancient rhythm. Let's begin, as always, not with heroes, but with those who worked behind them. For it was they who made the wheels of power turn. And without power, what are heroes? Just men with swords. Now, to start our tours, we must pass through the main gate. But do not be fooled by its size. This is not the entrance to the palace. It is merely the entrance to the city. The sun dips toward the hills. Bees hum among late blossoms. On an Aegean island, a great palace sinks into the long shadows of dusk. It is here where the legend began, or perhaps ended. It's me. Welcome to the Palace of Pylos. This is the Mycenaean palace where the stories of King Perseus, King Nestor and Helena Sparta all came together, and we're going to see what it was actually like to live here. Because remember, this wasn't just a royal residence, it was also a large administrative center in a big city. Now this whole site is about 14 acres, but the palace itself is this conglomeration of buildings right here. So that means there must have been tens of thousands of people living here during the Mycenaean era around 1600 BC, so we're talking more than twice the population of modern day. Manhattan. Wow, but how could so many people live and work here? Well, we can find out because, unlike most Mycenaean palaces, Pylos was never sacked. Instead, it was abandoned, which meant that archaeologists haven't trampled over this site like they did at Mycenae, Tiryns, or even That means we can actually get a pretty good idea of what the palace looked like when it was inhabited. So let's take a walk through the palace and try and imagine what life was like here. Okay, so first off, no, the palace didn't look like this. We'll get to that later. Right now, we're going to start in the southwest corner of the palace near the Lion Gate. And what we're looking at here is called the residential area, which is probably the least interesting part of the palace. These buildings are mostly just made up of rooms for the servants, guards, administrators, and other workers who lived here. There isn't much to see here. Oh wait, except for the famous frescoes, like this one right here. But those aren't really our focus today. What we want to do is track down the laborers who made the palace run. So let's go find them. So to follow the trail of the laborers, we head to the east side of the palace and enter the great storage hall known as the Citadel. Now this building alone is about 58,000 square feet, so that gives us an idea of the scale of the palace. We're going to walk down the central aisle lined with these which are these huge ceramic jars used for storing grain and other goods. Now depending on the size, these bad boys could hold up to 10,000 gallons of stuff. Now when the palace was occupied, these pithoi would have been stacked 3 high on all sides, meaning that this single room was used for storing the vast wealth of the Mycenaean kingdom. Now it would have been hard to imagine a more monotonous place to work. You'd wake before dawn. You'd sleep in a small stone dwelling, low to the ground. The roof held up by beams darkened from years of smoke. The floor is made of packed earth. It's always a little cool. The only window is a slit. The wind creeps through it. You'd stretch. Slowly, your back already aches. Not from today's labor, but from yesterday's and the day before. You wrap yourself in a rough woolen cloak. It scratches. The air smells of wet straw and distant sea salt. A thin barley porridge waits, still steaming in a bowl. You eat it quickly, without words. Outside, the morning is gray with mist. You join the others. No one speaks. The path to the palace curves uphill. Past goat pens, olive groves, and silent shrines tucked into stones. The Palace of Pylos is not what you'd imagine a palace to be. It's not towering like later Greek temples, but sprawling, a web of rectangular rooms, storage halls, and corridors painted in faded reds and blues. And you work in the storerooms. Endless halls, stacked with great pithoi. You begin with the olive presses, heavy stone basins, heavy wooden beams. You carry baskets of blackened fruit, some soft, some hard. The olives are pressed in slow rhythm, turned, crushed, pressed again. Oil seeps into shallow grooves and collects in channels. Thick, fragrant, slightly green. Your hands are always oily. They smell of leaves, mud, and crushed pits. By midday, the sun filters in through high vents, warming the air inside until the stone begins to sweat. Later, you help the scribes. Not to write, you cannot write, but to scrape the wax off used tablets. The scribes speak quietly, muttering numbers, names, and measures. You don't understand their words. They write in a script only a few know, but they nod at you, and that's enough. Once You dropped a wax tablet. It cracked. You had to replace it, pay for it. It took a month's worth of bread. So now, you carry each one like a sacred object. By evening, your legs tremble. You rinse your face with water from a clay jar. Dinner is barley and onions, sometimes goat cheese, if it hasn't spoiled. You sit in silence. Again, the sun sets pink behind the hills, and wind rattles the dry herbs hung from the beams above. And you sleep tired, aching, and full of the smell of olives, knowing tomorrow will bring more of the same. This is your life, not a hero's, not a myth, just the quiet, heavy rhythm of Mycenaean labor. Okay, so now we follow the laborers to the far end of the citadel. We've seen their endless task of moving goods in and out of these giant but where did the food come from that sustained all of these people? Well, the answer is right outside. We now leave the palace and explore the royal estate to get an idea of what life was like for the people who lived here. So this is the royal estate, and this is where the palace gets a little less mysterious. See, what is happening is that the excavated area of the palace doesn't actually extend to this outer area. This entire section of the royal estate was actually uncovered across the street at a site called the Anaya. That's because the locals were plowing their fields when they accidentally unearthed a Bronze Age treasure trove. So in order to protect the site, they built a road and put the palace under a parking lot. Lucky for us, archaeologists were able to use aerial photography and ground-penetrating radar to identify these structures and then excavate them. Now this means that the structures themselves haven't been disturbed, and we can get a clear picture of what the royal estate looked like. We're going to start at the top of the hill at the workshops. These were probably used by artisans who lived in the palace. They made everything from weapons to furniture to olive presses, which leads us to our next stop. Now this is a type of large rectangular structure that served as the center of public life in Mycenaean palaces. It's essentially a combination of an administrative building, a court, and a reception hall. In other words, the Magron is basically the palace's front office. The king sat on a throne in the middle of the room and gave audiences to visiting dignitaries and dispatched administrators on royal business. Behind the throne was a hearth and an altar dedicated to the Mycenaean gods. To the side was the queen's room, and in the back was an office for the king's secretary. Okay, so now we head down the hill to the last and certainly the greatest attraction of the royal estate, the Lion Gate. This is actually one of the most recognizable archaeological sites in Greece. Why? Well, the answer is right here. These two enormous stone lions flank the entrance to the palace like they're guarding it. But wait, those aren't real lions. These are actually a type of mythical creature called a sphinx. Now, sphinx are usually depicted as having the body of a lion and the wings of an eagle. But this pair of stone sphinx are instead riding on the backs of chariots. It makes sense to have a guardian figure like this at the entrance to the palace. But given the fact that there are no other sphinx anywhere else in the Mycenaean world, we're left to wonder why they chose this particular figure to guard their home. Okay, so now that we've explored the royal estate, let us take one last look at the palace to see what it might have looked like when it was occupied. And now we get to see what the palace actually looked like. Thanks to the hard work of many archaeologists over the years, we can digitally reconstruct what the palace looked like when it was occupied. And it looks pretty nice. This image comes from the University of Cincinnati, and it is the closest thing we have to a time machine. Wow, let's fly over the palace. We'll check out those beautiful blue corridors. Remember that scene from Game of Thrones where Tyrion visits the ruined city of Illyria? Yeah, me too. I mean, compare this to that. This is the difference between the artistic talent of HBO and actual archaeologists. But there's more to see. Look at those beautiful columns. What a sight. But the best is yet to come. Check this out, doesn't this feel like somewhere familiar? Yeah, that's because the architectural style of the Mycenaean palaces inspired the design of the White House. Look, it's even got those same columns. My point is that this palace was the birthplace of Western civilization. It was the seat of power for the greatest kingdoms in Greece. And yes, it may have even inspired the design of the most powerful building in America. But unfortunately, it wasn't destined to last. Sometime around 1100 BC, a series of earthquakes devastated the region, causing the palace to be abandoned. Whether or not it was ever reoccupied is up for debate. But one thing is for sure, the stories that unfolded here continued to inspire the ancient Greeks for centuries to come. Thank you so much for coming to the Palace of Pylos. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and check out the support page. The name Pylos means dark or dusky. It's said that the king's last days were filled with darkness, both literally and metaphorically, and we explored that in a special after show. I won't spoil anything here, but let's just say he met a pretty grim end. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Goodbye. The winds shift gently over the palace roofs. A cool evening mist settles across the hills as the stone corridors quieten. Somewhere beyond Pylos, in the great city of Mycenae itself, an old king lies in a darkened chamber. His name is not remembered, his name does not matter. But in his time, he ruled men, commanded ships, accepted offerings. Now, he can barely lift his hand. The king lies upon a wooden bed, raised on carved legs. The frame creaks softly beneath him as servants smooth the linen. A bronze brazier warms the room with faint smoke. Low juniper, low wood. The The walls are painted in scenes of lions and bulls. The once bright reds have dulled to rust. Dust gathers in the corners. His scepter, once carried proudly in courts and festivals, now leans uselessly against the wall. The king watches it in silence. Outside the chamber, priests murmur in low voices. They bring him honey cakes and wine, but he eats little now. Only his eyes move with purpose. Still alert, still calculating. The king's life was not one of battle or adventure. He never stormed Troy, he never traveled to Crete, he never wore armor in the streets. He ruled through lists, grain counts, and tribute jars. He knew how many oxen were kept in the lowlands. He knew which villagers owed him wool. He knew how many women worked in the weaving house, and how many jars of oil were sealed last moon. He was a logistics king, a quiet ruler, bound not to legend, but to order. His power lay in records, routine, and ritual. He rose early each morning. He met with scribes, priests, tax collectors. He sat beneath tall columns, sipping wine sweetened with herbs. Sometimes he'd listen to a bard, but only if the man's voice was soft. Now, at the end of his reign, the king dreams more than he speaks. He dreams of long stone corridors, of painted bulls, of quiet walks beneath the olive trees. He dreams of boats leaving the harbor, sails rising in the morning light. He hears distant drums, but they're not from within his palace. They echo from somewhere outside, across the sea, or perhaps just from within memory. Some believe the Mycenaean kings were descended from gods, but gods do not age. His bones ache like any shepherd's. His breath shortens with the same rhythm as any farmer's. His memory fades like the sunset. Slowly, beautifully, as the king sleeps, a priest steps inside. Barefoot, he sprinkles olive oil on the threshold, whispers a prayer to Poseidon, the earthshaker, the protector of the waning and the rising. No armies march, no throne is seized. This is not the fall of Troy, this is the quiet closing of a chapter in a stone chamber, above a valley of olives. One day his body will be wrapped in linen, placed in a deep-cut shaft tomb. Gold will cover his eyes, a spiral ring may adorn his finger. But for now, he simply lies in stillness. In the heart of the Mycenaean palace he helped preserve. Outside, the sky turns violet. Cicadas hum softly in the trees. The king breathes in and lets go. As the palace prepares for morning, the scribes return to their work, but their records speak in riddles, and the future will forget their script. We turn now to a quieter mystery, hidden in wax and clay. This is the true story of the Mycenaean kings, a civilization that flourished in Greece around 1600 BC, during what historians call the Late Bronze Age. It's an era best known today for its greatest warrior king, the legendary Agamemnon. But while Homeric tales tell of his 10-year siege at Troy, we know from archaeological evidence that his Mycenaean predecessors built and maintained a sprawling kingdom for almost 200 years before that. On the Peloponnese Peninsula, spread across fortified palaces, their presence seemed immutable. So when they suddenly disappeared, it left scholars scrambling to understand why. Was it the Dorian invasion, a supposed migration of invaders who replaced the Mycenaeans and erased their legacy? Or was it something more complex? The truth is there are no surviving records from the Mycenaean rulers themselves, leaving us with few answers about their political structure, culture, or even how to pronounce their names. The closest thing to their own account comes from the tablets of Pylos, a series of clay discs stamped with wet clay, found in the late 19th century at the site of the Mycenaean palace at Enhad. They were first decoded in the 1950s by archaeologist John Chadwick, who was able to translate them thanks to a previously deciphered Linear B script discovered on nearby Crete. Together, these two ancient scripts unlocked the secrets of Mycenaean Greece. But while the Cretan tablets mainly contain administrative records, the Pylos tablets tell the story of a palace. They describe how workers were assigned to maintain the building, plant the crops, herd the sheep, tend the bees. They list how much grain each farmer had to contribute to the royal pantry, and how many women were working in the royal workshops. And although they reveal some interesting details about everyday life at the height of Mycenaean civilization, what they don't tell us is anything about the kings themselves. This is partly because most of the surviving tablets are damaged. Chadwick estimates that only 8% of them remain intact. Many others are broken into pieces that could fit back together like a jigsaw puzzle, but only if we knew the picture on the box. Fortunately, archaeologists also found several lead tablets among the ruins of the palace at Pylos, along with dozens of fragments inscribed on both sides. Taken together, these tablets paint a clearer picture of the king's role in the Mycenaean world. He oversaw trade missions, he managed tributes, he owned vineyards and orchards, cattle, pigs, donkeys, even concubines. But all these lists feel pretty mundane for a king. There's nothing here about Trojan wars or legendary beasts, and that wasn't lost on me as I pored over the tablets, thinking about all the histories that repeat this pattern. In fact, I think it is part of the reason I was so excited to write this series in the first place. Most medieval kings didn't conquer monsters. Most medieval queens didn't slay dragons. Instead, they balanced budgets, maintained roads, negotiated treaties, sent out diplomats. When it comes to history, we often think of our favorite stories as epic battles between good and evil. But in reality, most of the people we consider heroes spent their days solving problems, big and small, in the mundane world we live in today. So while deciphering the tablets of Pylos is obviously important to understanding ancient history, I find them especially relevant to my own experiences as a historian. There is another detail that fascinates me. Throughout these texts, we see the king listed alongside other objects in the palace. The ivory throne, the seal ring, the silver goblets. The king isn't described as powerful or heroic, but as something owned, something listed, numbered, categorized, an object like any other. But again, this isn't unique to the ancient world. Today, we tend to think of the monarch as the head of state, a symbolic figurehead with absolute power, but in practice, that's rarely been the case. For much of human history, monarchs held their positions through inheritance, but then had to prove themselves worthy of the crown through deeds of valor. Even in the modern era, hereditary rule is uncommon, and where it does occur, it's often overshadowed by democratic processes that might be changing right now. But whether we're talking about the kings of Mycenaean or the emperors of Rome, the pharaohs of Egypt or the shahs of Iran, hereditary rule has not always meant total power, but it did mean a lot of record keeping. And the final tablets show us the origin of the king's power, the ceremony of installation. The moment he takes his seat on the throne and officially becomes the head of the palace, the steward of its archives. To better understand this transition, let's revisit a scene from the very beginning of this episode. As the sun rises, the king walks onto his balcony, dressed in a long robe, wearing a conical cap, holding a scepter. He's surrounded by members of his court, as well as two men in ceremonial dress who stand on either side of the stairs. They are his bodyguards, but they're also there to represent the land itself, to symbolize the king's connection to the soil, the animals, the buildings, everything that makes up his realm. And as he raises his hands in supplication, they respond in kind. This gesture echoes the famous scene in Xenophon's Anabasis, in which Cyrus the Great of Persia issues his founding charter, lifting his hands towards the sky as though embracing the whole world. In these moments, kings don't just take their seats, they take on responsibilities. They become stewards, not owners. They receive the weight of the past and the hopes of the future, knowing that every decision they make will be recorded in clay or wax tablet, written down in the annals of their realm. In this series, we explore the lives of the kings and queens who came before us. Join us as we dig into the historical records, uncover the myths and legends, and separate fact from fiction to reveal the real people behind the stories. New episodes premiere every Thursday. See you next time. Ancient Greece, 1700 BCE. The Mycenaean king has returned from battle. Victorious, his soldiers are with him, weary and eager for rest. Servants fan the air with fragrant olive branches, chasing flies from their great feast. Goblets ring with wine. Roasts turn on spits. An epic poem is being performed, celebrating the deeds of heroes. And the king's son watches from a corner, aloof. He hears the bards recount his father's battles, see the king's queen sit at his side, bask in the light of his glory. And all the while, he feels a deep ache within him. He wants more. He wants to hear about gods, monsters, magic, voyages across the sea, about the first man who fished up the sacred fire from the depths of the underworld. The hero tales make him impatient. He turns away from the boisterous hall and goes out into the cool night air. The moon is bright tonight. Its cold light glints off bronze helmets, still warm from the battle. Where are the stories of those who wielded those weapons? He wonders. There was Ares, who fought at his father's side, but he is dead. Or maybe not. He thinks of the stories of Hades, who stole Persephone, the earth goddess, from her mother Demeter, and he thinks of war. What if Ares did not die? What if he went to the underworld? If he could just travel there, he would retrieve Ares. He would bring him back. They would be a pair, conqueror and god of war, ruling supreme. The son of the king disappears into the dark. We do not know his name. We don't know where he came from or how he died. And neither do the Greeks in their epic poems. They speak of him only as a nameless youth, a phantom child of wrath. This was 400 years before Homer wrote the Iliad. The oral tradition of ancient Greece had not yet settled around a set of heroes. Their tales would come later. And so, the story of the nameless youth may have been lost forever, but something of it remains, carved into a stone slab found at the site of a Bronze Age settlement near Athens, next to a circle of houses and a well, but not a palace, far from the center of power. Here the story is inscribed in Linear B, the archaic script of the very people whose palaces were burning when the nameless youth dreamed of conquering hell. This tablet and another found nearby are the only evidence of this tale in the entire ancient Greek corpus, and scholars have debated its meaning for decades. Who was this boy? Was he a king? Did he rule alongside Ares, and why is his story hidden away here? So much of Greece's pre-Homeric past is a mystery. History fails us, tablets decay, palaces burn, and then there are other gaps in the story. What didn't survive? What was never written down? The nameless youth is one thing among countless others that fell out of memory, leaving us to guess at the shape of ancient Greece. It's easy to feel as if we know everything about the golden age of Athens, the rise of Alexander, the glory of Yet for every marble temple and stately vase painting, there are thousands of lives lived and lost, a multitude of moments that left no mark. The nameless youth does not appear in any other inscription. His journey to hell is known only from the Pylos tablet, and yet he speaks to us with an unsettling familiarity. Think of the countless sons and grandsons of kings, princes, warriors and heroes, who yearned for more than courtly life could provide, who dreamed of glory, all of them nameless, all of them lost, all of them, in their own way, wrestling to become something more. We think of Perseus slaying Medusa. We recall Odysseus slaying the suitors. We cheer for Heracles slaying the Nemean lion. But these are epic tales. We see the end result. What of the impetus? We are lucky to have the fragments of Hesiod's Theogony, tracing the genealogy of the gods. But the epics, the Iliad and Odyssey, are missing. Homer was not the first poet. He did not invent the dactylic hexameter. He did not introduce epic similes or epithets. Someone else did that first, but we will never know who. And so the nameless youth is both singular and universal. He is one person, yes, but also a type, a common figure who appears in countless stories throughout the ancient Mediterranean. The boy who journeys to hell, the hero who steals the sacred fire, the demigod who defies his father, the king who kills his brother, all of them driven by ambition, thwarted by fate. The discovery of the Pylos tablet was a sensation when it hit the archaeological headlines in 1966. At the time, Linear B had only been deciphered a decade earlier, and here was an inscription unlike any other. The text reads, in translation, the prince was saying to the old man, "Take me to Hades, lead me to Hades." So the old man replied, "You cannot go to Hades. Hades is inaccessible, child of man, nor shall any mortal man ever get news of Hades." Scholars have spent the better part of half a century trying to puzzle out the story. Who is the prince? Who is the old man? Is this a ritual, a prayer, a curse? The consensus today is that we are seeing a vision, that the nameless youth is journeying to the land of the dead, asking for passage, and the old man is Tiresias the blind prophet. He doesn't want to help. He warns the youth that Hades is inescapable, but he helps anyway, because what choice does he have? And so the youth enters the underworld. According to some interpretations, he becomes its ruler. To others, he brings war to hell, infecting the realm of the dead with violence, and yet others suggest that he simply perishes. Either way, the story is deeply unsettling. For one thing, the location is unusual. Linear B tablets were typically found in palaces or temples, places of political and religious authority. This one was discovered in a domestic context, seemingly carved into the floor of a house. For another, the characters behave strangely. The youth is reckless. He ignores Tiresias' warnings and he enters hell anyway. And then there is hell itself. In Hesiod's description, it is an orderly place. Souls arrive, they receive judgment, and then they depart. This tablet shows a realm overrun by a willful demigod. It's as if the familiar landscape of hell has been somehow corrupted. The story is incomplete and the implications are vast. When considering the history of a culture, it's essential to look beyond what was preserved. Not everything survives. Not everything was meant to. As archaeologist Jack Davis has argued, cultures are not static. They evolve. The Mycenaean world was not the birthplace of ancient Greece. It was its afternoon. And just as every afternoon slips eventually into evening, the Mycenaean era ended too. The Linear B tablets tell us as much. Though they were written in the same script, they represent different worlds. Early tablets are concerned with inventories, rations, attendance records. Later ones discuss cults, hymns, and festivals. Still later ones mention horse trading, beekeeping, winemaking, olive picking. Mycenaean civilization was changing. So too was its language. By 1100 BCE, Linear B was gone and ancient Greece would never be the same. Today, Linear B tablets can be found all across the Peloponnese, on Crete, in Cyprus, and on the islands of the Aegean. They offer a glimpse into 1,000 years before Homer. They reveal a complex society of farmers, herders, artisans, servants, scribes, and kings. But they also point toward the collapse of that society and the loss of its script, its language, its culture. Much of ancient Greece is missing, lost to the sands of time. We have no way of knowing how many works of art were destroyed, how many statues crumbled, how many hymns were sung and then forgotten, how many epics were recited and then lost. And yet the nameless youth persists, carved into a stone slab in the rough countryside, far from the centers of power, far from the halls of kings. In his journey to hell, he embodies the restless spirit of ancient Greece, always reaching for more, always seeking glory, always striving to understand the unknown. He is the embodiment of ambition and desire, tragic and eternal. He is the shadow self of every seeker after glory, and he is the ghost of ancient Greece. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you'd like to support our channel, you can become a member at our website. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the Mycenaean palace, where the king resides surrounded by his court and where guests from across the known world pass through. Here in the heart of ancient Greece around 1600 BC, the king's wealth is legendary. Though many of his treasures have been lost to the sands of time, what remains is his magnificent palace. Its corridors wind together like a labyrinth, hiding secrets around every turn. You feel a chill despite the heat of the day. These great stone halls might be empty now, but they were alive only yesterday with hundreds of people going about their business. Servants moving between rooms, scribes recording decrees for the king, soldiers sharpening their spears. At times, there must have been noise, shouts, arguments. Other times, though, the palace must have felt very much like it does now. Quiet, you walk down a corridor, stepping carefully to avoid the scattered stones, feeling the rough coolness of the bedrock beneath your feet. The walls are hard and unforgiving, yet they have stood here for decades. How long? Who knows? The palace was here long before you arrived, and it will still be standing when you leave. Sunlight filters through cracks in the ceiling, revealing dust motes dancing in the light. Some of these rooms are empty, others are filled with the detritus of daily life. A broken shard of pottery lies in the corner. A discarded scrap of papyrus floats in the breeze. An old sandal has found its final resting place here. Many rooms, though, are just as you found them, untouched since the day the palace was abandoned. Pottery still sits on shelves, perfectly preserved. Bronze weapons hang on the wall, glinting in the dim light. And in some places, items of clothing lie folded, just as they were put down. The palace belonged to the greatest king in Greece, or so he believed. His name was Pylos, which means gray or stormy, a fitting name for a ruler who commanded the seas and the weather. He ruled over the Mycenaeans, a culture born in the mountains and valleys of Greece, then spreading to the coast. By now, the Mycenaeans controlled nearly all of Greece, and their ships could be found on nearly every sea. His palace was the largest in Greece, possibly housing thousands of people at once. As you move through the halls, you can imagine how crowded it must have been at times. Servants carrying out orders, merchants bartering for goods, visitors enjoying the luxuries provided for them by the king. There were palaces like this all over Greece, each of them a testament to the power of the kings who ruled, but none were as grand as this. Outside, the temperature is stifling, but inside, the air is cool and stale. The palace offers little respite from the midday sun, but it hides many secrets. Frescoes adorn the walls, depicting scenes from myths and legends. You see the wrath of Poseidon, the journey of Heracles, and the labors of Theseus. Each painting is a masterpiece, done by artists whose names have been lost to time. Some rooms contain nothing but bare stone walls. Others are covered in treasures. Some rooms were used for work, others for pleasure. The kitchens must have been busy places, filled with the sounds of cooking. The king's bedroom was likely the most luxurious chamber in the whole palace, a sanctuary for the royal family. But not everyone in this palace lived in luxury. Slaves moved through the hallways unseen, doing menial tasks and cleaning up after the higher members of society. The palace wasn't built for slaves, but without them, it wouldn't have run. They worked tirelessly in the kitchens, the workshops, and the gardens, making sure the palace ran smoothly. Their living quarters were cramped and dark, far from the beautiful frescoed halls. They slept in groups, sharing the little space they had with as many as 5 other people. The rooms had dirt floors and thatched roofs, and the walls were made of mud brick. There was no furniture, just blankets and mats spread out on the ground. But even in these dark, dank rooms, there was a sense of community. The slaves worked together, ate together, and slept together. They had little, but they had each other. You come across a courtyard, the center of the palace complex. It was here that the king received ambassadors and conducted important business. Fountains bubbled in the center, surrounded by manicured gardens. The sound of water trickling over stone still echoes here, even if only in your imagination. Stone benches and chairs are placed throughout the courtyard, some broken, others whole. This courtyard was once a hub of activity, a place where deals were made and alliances forged. Now it's silent. The fountain has stopped running and the gardens have withered. The courtyard is empty, save for you. You notice a doorway leading to another part of the palace. It's carved from wood, decorated with intricate designs. Above it, a frieze depicts scenes from the life of the king. You push the door open and step inside. You find yourself in the royal dining room, a large, airy room with high ceilings. The walls are decorated with frescoes of feasts and banquets. In the center of the room is a large table made of polished stone, surrounded by chairs and benches. You can almost hear the echoes of laughter and conversation as nobles and dignitaries gathered around this table to eat and drink. The table is set with plates of food and goblets of wine. You pick up a plate and examine it. The paint is still vibrant, the clay still hard. Imagine the feasts that must have been held here. Roasted meats, bowls of fruit, platters of bread. You can almost taste the food, smell the spices. As you move through the dining room, you notice decorations on the walls. Intricate patterns and designs created with bright colors. The ceiling is decorated with paintings of the constellations, guiding the royals through the night sky. The room is filled with light, streaming in through the open doors. Outside, the wind blows, carrying the scent of flowers and herbs. A vase sits on a nearby table, filled with fresh flowers. Their petals are soft and fragrant. You take a deep breath and close your eyes. For a moment, you are transported to another time. You are sitting at the king's table, enjoying a delicious meal. The company is lively and the conversation is engaging. You laugh and tell stories. Time passes quickly and soon it is time to go. You stand up, feeling satisfied and content. The meal was delicious and the company was even better. You thank the king and queen for their hospitality and make your way to the door. As you step outside, you take one last look at the royal dining room. The setting sun casts long shadows on the walls, and you can just make out the figures of the king and queen sitting at the table. They are joined by a small group of nobles and courtiers. They are laughing and talking, oblivious to the fact that you are watching them. You smile to yourself. This is what it must be like to be royalty, to live in a world of luxury and comfort. You move on, continuing your exploration of the palace. The rooms are filled with treasures from around the world. You see statues of gods and heroes, weapons from far-off lands, and jewelry made with precious metals. Some items are mundane, like the bronze cooking pots or the clay storage jars. Others are more exotic, like the ivory cups or the colorful fabrics. It's clear that the king had a taste for luxury. He surrounded himself with beautiful things and enjoyed the finer points of life. The palace was his masterpiece. It was a symbol of his power and wealth, but it was also his home. He lived here with his family and courtiers. They worked here, played here, and sometimes died here. The palace saw it all. It was a witness to the rise and fall of kings, the glory and tragedy of the Mycenaean civilization. As you explore the palace, you can't help but feel a sense of wonder. These halls and chambers are unlike anything you've ever seen before. The art alone is worth the trip. The paintings on the walls are some of the best you've seen in your life. They tell stories and depict scenes from Greek mythology. You can see gods and heroes, monsters and beasts. The artwork is so detailed and lifelike that you feel like you're right there in the middle of the action. But it's not just the art that's impressive. The architecture is amazing, too. The palace is a maze of corridors and courtyards. You can get easily lost here. The rooms are all different shapes and sizes. Some are small and cramped, while others are large and airy. The ceilings are high and the columns are thick. It's hard to believe that such a massive structure could have been built so long ago. As you make your way through the palace, you stumble upon a hidden gem, a small room tucked away in a corner. Inside, you find a library. The room is filled with shelves upon shelves of tablets and scrolls. You can imagine scholars and scribes poring over these ancient texts, recording the history of the Mycenaean civilization. The scrolls contain everything from religious texts to legal documents. You can't read the faded ink, but you can appreciate the craftsmanship. Some scrolls are bound with leather, others with bronze. Some are neatly rolled, while others are bundled together in a rough fashion. You run your fingers along the spines, tracing the embossed designs. The library is quiet, the perfect place for contemplation and study. The silence is broken only by the sound of your own breathing and the rustling of the scrolls. In the distance, you hear the faint sound of drums and flutes. You pause to listen, wondering if it's just a figment of your imagination, or if there really is music playing. You can't quite make out the melody, but it sounds hauntingly beautiful. Suddenly you remember that you are not alone. The palace is said to be haunted by the ghosts of those who once lived here. Could this be the music of the ghosts? You shiver, imagining the spirits of the past dancing in the shadows. Quickly, you shake off the thought. You refuse to be frightened by local legends. Besides, you're not sure if you believe in ghosts. As you continue exploring the palace, you can't help but feel a sense of sadness. This once magnificent structure is now in ruins. The frescoes have faded, the marble is crumbling, the throne is broken. It's hard to imagine the splendor that must have once graced these halls. You wander through the deserted chambers, the only sound your own footsteps echoing in the silence. The palace is a tomb of the past, a reminder of a civilization that is long gone. You come to a grand staircase spiraling upwards towards the top of the palace. It's made of white marble and adorned with intricate carvings. You imagine the many important figures who must have ascended these stairs, each step echoing with the sound of their footsteps. You climb the stairs, feeling the cool marble beneath your hands. The carvings are worn smooth by time, but you can still make out the figures of gods and heroes frozen in mid-stride on the steps. You reach the top of the stairs and find yourself in a long corridor. The corridor is dimly lit, the only light filtering in through cracks in the ceiling. You can see the faint outlines of frescoes on the walls, but the details are lost to time. The corridor is empty, save for you and the ghosts of the past. At the end of the corridor, you find a heavy wooden door. It's carved with scenes from Greek mythology. You push open the door and step inside. You find yourself in a large, square room. The walls are made of rough stone and the ceiling is low. In the center of the room is a single shaft, letting in a sliver of light. You walk to the center of the room and look up. The shaft is decorated with a series of holes. When the light shines through them, it creates a beautiful pattern on the floor. You stand there for a moment, mesmerized by the play of light and shadow. Suddenly you realize that you're not alone. Someone or something is watching you from the shadows. You turn to look, but there's nothing there. You try to shake off the feeling, but it's no use. You can feel eyes boring into you, watching your every move. You want to run, but your legs feel heavy and unresponsive. You struggle to break free, but it's no use. You are trapped in the labyrinth of the past. The palace is closing in on you, and you can feel the weight of history pressing down on you. You try to scream, but no sound comes out. You are trapped in a prison of your own mind, unable to escape the clutches of the past. You wake up with a start, gasping for breath. The morning sun streams in through the broken ceiling, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. You are in the palace courtyard. The palace looms around you, silent and imposing. You look up at the towering walls, feeling small and insignificant. You remember your dream, the oppressive feeling of being trapped, the suffocating sense of history. You shake off the memory, trying to focus on the present. The palace is just a ruin, it can't hurt you. You take a deep breath and start to explore, eager to uncover more of its secrets. But as you move through the halls, you can't shake the feeling that you are being watched. The banquet fades. The lamps dim. Somewhere a tablet is being written. A king is being remembered. A worker is sleeping on a straw mat near the oil press. And you are drifting now between the halls of stone and the clouds of dreams. You've walked the storage corridors. You've stood beside the dying king. You've listened to the scribes and you've sat at the banquet of lords, all in the still, forgotten beauty of Mycenaean Greece. You awaken to the insistent bleating of a goat, the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the shouts of men working together as one. The air is alive with the scent of wood smoke and the taps of the sea. Sunlight streams through an open doorway, illuminating motes dancing in the air. A rooster crows, a dog barks, a woman's laughter echoes through the courtyard. Men are readying their chariots outside the palace, preparing for a journey perhaps to the Linear B archive, where clay tablets inscribed with the earliest form of Greek are kept safe in the dark, dry storerooms, or perhaps to the great treasury of Atreus, a tomb that rivals the palace in its splendor, where a great king is laid to rest. You join the procession, making its way through the arched gateway and out into the world, a world of towering mountains, rolling hills, and fertile valleys where the great rivers, the Eurotas and the Alpheus, wind through the landscape like silver threads. The road ahead is long, but the journey is made lighter by the rhythmic motion of chariots' wheels and the sound of your companions' voices raised in song. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, you feel its warmth on your skin and the excitement of the chase in your heart. The other players are eager to test their skills against yours, to see who among you is the fastest, the strongest, the most cunning. You grip the reins tightly and urge your horse forward, feeling the wind whip through your hair as you race toward the finish line. The crowd cheers and the bard strikes up a lively tune, celebrating the end of the games and the start of a new festival. The Panathenea, where the air is filled with the scent of roasting meat and the sound of revelers' laughter. You feast with your companions, sharing stories and jokes late into the night, the flickering light of the bonfire dancing in your eyes. And as the celebration reaches its peak, you find yourself swept up in the joyous energy of the moment, dancing and singing with abandon until, exhausted but exhilarated, you finally collapse into a well-earned sleep. And now you are here in the great city of Mycenae, standing before the Lion Gate, ready to begin your adventure. But where will you go first? What will you do? The choice, as always, is yours.